Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Caroline Colas, and I am the Senior Director of the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan Health and Wellness Department. We have partnered with the Holbing Institute to bring you a series on how to cope and thrive during these times of uncertainty. So I moderate these lunch and learns, and I get the opportunity to experience and ask leading experts in the fields of positive psychology and resilience who are going to offer us and have been offering us a variety of skills. So I hope that you've been finding these lunch and learns both practical and helping with social isolation. And speaking of isolation, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Isolation can be a wicked problem at this time, but it can't destroy us. In this session with Industrial Design's Richard Präter, we will learn about design-based solutions that include two very important things: a response to context and the ability to be vulnerable when starting something without seeing or knowing the endpoint. Designers practice and build their skills by creating bold plans and solutions that are relevant, nonlinear, responsive to the immediate environment, and push beyond what we already know. No talent or design skill is needed to start your thinking about bold solution during this time. Now, Richard Präter, an industrial designer, lives and works in New York City, and he's applying his human-centered approach to drive innovation and growth for some of the world's leading businesses, including corporations as diverse as L'Oreal and Rio Tinto. For 7 years, he has monitored and trained individuals on how to apply design methodology, which I'm so excited to learn what that is actually. And now, after shining, refining, and redefining these principles, he shares them in his book, Our Design Challenge, for anyone that feels stuck by life's obstacles, struggles, or traumas. Boy, does that sound like us. Welcome to the call, Rick Präter.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm going to spotlight you on video. And
Thank you.
Gosh, let's go ahead and, first of all, how are you doing today? How's it going?
I'm doing good.
Should we design our time together and begin with a mindful pause and have everybody just breathe in and take your arms over your head and just bring them down through the center? Right? Let's do that a few more times, just a couple times. Yeah, inhale and exhale and bring the arms down. Nice. I find that calms and centers me, and I love 3. You can probably tell me about 3, Rick. And inhale one more time and do it 3 times. That's it. Awesome. Yeah. So, industrial design. Let's start with, what is that? As we were talking about earlier.
What is?
Am I coming through?
Okay. Well, I guess I would like to preface.
What is industrial design? Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yeah. Industrial. I'd like to probably start with what design is. Most people get when they hear the word design.
Stop their videos. So Rick, hang on one second. Let's have everybody stop their videos. So we're having sort of a bandwidth challenge. And thank you. Turn off your videos, everyone. And let's see if that's a little bit better. And then we'll come back. As we say in performing, do over. Yeah, thanks. Okay. All right. All right, so Rick, go ahead. What is industrial design?
So industrial design started basically at the Industrial Revolution, when items were starting to be created for people in mass production. So it really originated with cars, farm equipment, anything that was large that had to be created in a factory would be considered industrial design. So that's how it started. It wasn't really started as an aesthetic form of design that started following afterwards. It was a merger between manufacturing and engineering. And then it grew to how do you attract people to purchase something, but it grew to being more aesthetic based as well. So today it involves system design, urban planning. and it's a little bit broader
What is
than that.
human-centered design? Yeah. And what is
It's pretty
human-centered
much
design?
human-centered design. Human-centered design is pretty much like it says. It puts the human in the center, and it solves a problem around the person, taking their whole consideration, you know, the whole being in heart. And it has to be future-focused and solve the problem long-term wise. So one of the tools that it uses for human-centered design is design thinking. And that's the methodology I'm kind of going to go over with now, because it can be adapted to personal use as well.
Great.
So my book, what I did is I took... Yeah.
No, you go ahead. I think
ahead.
we're having some delay, so I'm going to wait.
Yeah.
We can even do a hand signal. I'm done talking, you're done talking. Yeah, so we can, because there's a little bit of delay. I'm not quite sure why with this, our technology, who knows. Let's see what we've got. On my end, your audio is perfect. Your video is frozen. I just closed all the other tabs. Okay, thank you, Lindsay. I need to open and took my phone off Wi-Fi. Video is better. Still a little slow and choppy. Works perfect for me. Okay, everything is frozen. Your video thumbnail is now clear. Okay, so here we go. Do-over number 2.
All right.
All right. I will give you a thumbs up when I'm wanting to ask a question, or when I'm done, and you kind of give me a little thumbs up. That way we'll know. So go ahead and start sharing the screen, and we'll go ahead through your presentation.
Yeah. So again, human-centered design puts the human or the person in the center and just solves a problem by designing everything around them. And the way they do is the tool that they use is normally design thinking. So it takes the whole person into fact, their mind, body, and spirit, and then works for a future-focused aspect for them. That's enough of that slide. There's 5 different phases. Can we switch to the next slide? Anyway. So there are 5 different stages for the aspect. It's empathy, defining the problem, or as well as you know it at the time, ideate, prototype, and then test. And then for human-centered design, the testing goes on and on and on. So like currently, like if you purchase any tech materials, iPhones, computers, you notice how they update all the time. Those are created by human-centered design, where they're always adapting and changing for your needs. So they're considering what you're looking at, what you're seeing, and they're adapting it for what you need. Like cars update every year, phones do. Slide just switched. So that's the basics of human-centered design. And how it can be applied is because the methodology actually works with the person, the whole person. You know, your mind, how you think, your body, how you feel, how your body is used, and basically your spirit, your emotions. So what I wanted to do is go over some design hacks of how I've applied the methodology to help with this wicked problem of isolation. I don't know about you guys, but that's been my major problem with the lockdown that we've had, you know, is isolating away from other people. We can reach each other with technology, but we can't reach each other personally too well. So I've taken the methodology and I've divided it in a few ways, and I've done it some things that we can all adapt and use. So the first one, are you there, Carolyn? The first one,
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. The first one I would like to do for go over is for empathy, is to be empathetic for yourself. Because you can apply empathy for yourself as well as other people. And most of my hacks that I've done have changed and adapted because I've been doing some testing as well. Megan handled it really well yesterday when she said that, you know, she kind of hit a wall and then things were trying to fall apart when she was doing her yoga. that's the same thing that happened to me about 4 weeks ago. I've started to have to change some of the hacks that I've done and adapted them. So I'm going to start with the beginning of them, give people what I've done, and then see how they modified and changed. So for the baby yourself, it's basically babying yourself. Anytime I'm going through any form of adjustment or stress, I normally like to baby myself, and I do try to do it regularly, which is put myself on a schedule, an eating schedule, a sleeping schedule, a waking schedule, a lunch schedule, anything to regulate myself, because I find that it regulates my mood, my spirit, and my emotions. And then during this time, for isolation, I realized I wasn't really planning a lot of fun in that. I was on survival mode, not joy mode. So when I've been working as well. So what I've done for this is hacked it a little bit more, and I've scheduled in some fun time every day. I still work with a paper calendar. So I started adapting the schedule that I normally do. I normally do tasks per day in the office. I have marketing on Mondays, finance on Tuesdays, sales on Wednesdays, education on Thursdays, and then optimization on Fridays. So I've adopted that for what I can do for fun, so I can mark it up. So on Sunday nights when I'm filling out my calendar, I start to fill out the fun. So I have like a fun dinner party. You were talking about your birthday. I do share recipes with my friends, and we do a Zoom dinner party on Monday nights. Tuesday, I have a social club that I'm a member of, and if I don't do the social club, I watch a movie. But Wednesday nights, I do a card game, Cards Against Humanity, with friends, and then Thursday is a movie night with other friends, and then Friday's open for birthday parties, social parties, and other engagements. And I mark them in red so I can see them very clearly every single day. And I do it on Sundays just so it gives me something kind of exciting to see during the week. You know, it's a little energetic. So the next one, I was going to the next slide, is the define yourself, defining the problem. My major problem when I entered this was working at home and being at home so much. So I decided to design my environment. And by designing your environment, I started with working in my dining room, and I realized, you know, it was really disruptive. So I started by setting up the workstation in the morning, working throughout the day, and then making sure I cleaned it up in the evening and turned it back into the dining room during the day. I've adapted and kind of changed that now because I needed a little more exciting, because pre-pandemic, Rick, I would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to the gym, get up, pray, meditate, have a healthy breakfast, go to the gym for about an hour and a half, get cleaned up, go to work for 2 hours, and then organize my day, start the design hustle, start meeting with vendors, photo shoots, all the stuff that I have to do, and then I'd have activities in the evening. So my days were dynamic, moving, I saw a lot of people, and I did a lot of stuff. And now, even working at home, you don't really do much. I mean, there's not a lot of connection. So for me, what I realized, designing my environment could be a little bit more dynamic if I moved my office around. So every week or every couple of days, I actually move my desk. I don't work in the dining room exclusively anymore. Sometimes I'll move my desk into the living room, I'll move it into the office, and I do the same structure where I clean it up at the end of the day so my apartment becomes my apartment again. But I found it, I know it takes a little extra work, but I found it a little more exciting to kind of move it around a little bit.
I love that.
Well, it's something, you know, we need as much as we can get nowadays, you know?
I had this creative inspiration of
What?
like having the Zoom call with the backdrop of my shower curtain, which is all these little rubber duckies for tomorrow for the creativity workshop. So I was like, oh, this is so creative.
Sticking your Zoom call in the bathroom.
Right.
Perfect.
Why not?
All right. So the next one, yeah. The next slide is for the third form of methodology, which is ideate. And this one is for reframe. This is got to be my favorite favorite design hack. It was favorite form of methodology because you can carry it and use it anywhere. It's basic. You've mentioned this, Carolyn. When you change your attitude and mood, it's going to change where you go. That's essentially a reframe. You're basically reframing the challenge and the problem to something positive. Human-centered design has the people that created it basically set values that or standards that you relate it to. One of the standards for human-centered design is that it has to you have to have a positive outlook to know that the solution is solvable. So that really makes it a reframe, because you have to know a problem is solvable to work to solve it. So to do that, the reframe that's been actually pretty consistent for me, on September the 17th, March the 16th, gyms in New York closed. And it was my last time to work out. And it was kind of sad at 5:30 in the morning. There wasn't really anybody in the gym. It wasn't very active. And I realized that I normally am there from like 5:30 to like 6 or 7, 7:30. And that would be it. And there's a reason why I work out of the gym, because I don't really want to do it at home. I probably wouldn't, to tell you honestly. And so I thought to myself, how am I going to handle being trapped in my house so much without being able to work out for at least an hour and a half a day? So I just looked at what I needed. My gym is like a block away from where I live. It's obviously open up really early in the morning, and it's got a contained environment. I don't have to worry about it snowing or raining. I can always be there and I can always work out. So when I thought of those and I reframed it, like, what am I going to do? Or how am I going to work out with those conditions? It really kind of, the answer revealed itself quickly. It was, I chose to do the emergency staircases in the building. So I live on the 18th floor, and I've been running up and down, running down, walking up the staircase, 3 times for at least a good 45 minutes in the morning. And it's been a great workout. I mean, if the pandemic has done anything, obviously it's done a lot of negative things. It's given me, I can crack walnuts in my ass and my legs right now. They're made out of steel. So
That's great.
That one's pretty good. And I've been able to open it up to jogging and a little bit on the East River, but at least I'm getting my workout in, and I've been able to reframe it and to have some kind of consistency to the life that I had before. And then the fourth principle or stage is called a prototype. And I like very much rapid prototypes. And what a prototype is that you represent, it's a representation of what a solution of the problem is. It's basically a model of it. You have to model it. It has to have 2 principles. It has to be done for a rapid prototype. You have to use something that's basically readily accessible, and it has to be mobile, so you can show it to somebody so they can evaluate it and look at it. And one thing that has really helped me in prototyping is time for this one. And I think Mega, who did the presentation on yoga last week, did a really, really, really good rapid prototype of time when she asked us to think of, our right hand as the past and our left hand as the future, and then bring them together to the present. That's a prototype. That's a rapid prototype. Something that you can do quickly that represents. So I don't know about you guys, but time for me, time for me doesn't just seem like Groundhog Day. It also seems like time whiplash. Like sometimes it goes really quickly, and then sometimes it goes really, really slowly. And I feel like I'm getting jostled around. So to be able to prototype time and put it in perspective has been a real benefit for me. And this is one thing that I've actually helped some friends with. I have a friend, Todd, that we all have had to do changes with this and to reestablish where we are. But he left the city to go to Florida on vacation when the beginning of this happened. When they finally arrived to Florida, they drove. They had to quarantine for 2 weeks. And this was at the beginning when we were all like, this isn't a really big deal, or a big deal, but not so serious yet. They had a house, a pool. The quarantine was really pretty easy. And then as things progressed, You know, he had to let go 1,000 people at work. He took a huge salary cut. New York was not doing very well, and the numbers of illness was really rising. And he realized he could never come back because he has MS and he's on immune suppressant medication. So it started to get kind of dire for him. So they extended their vacation, and they decided, his husband lives in Montreal, has a home in Montreal. So they decided to drive from Florida all the way to Montreal because they could stay there. So they took 3 days to get there, and had to test the hotels to make sure that they were cleaned and stuff before they arrived at them. And when they finally arrived at Montreal, the border, they knew that they were stricter, but they didn't realize that they actually tag you. They have people meet you where you're going to go. They give you a certain amount of time to get there, and then they monitor exactly what you're going to be doing, and then they monitor it every day or two. So they have an apartment, but they couldn't even go on the deck, and they could not get out of the apartment for 2 weeks. Couldn't walk the dog, nothing. So they had to arrange for all of that. So he called me up when he got there after driving for 3 days, and he was a little frustrated. So he was, he was one of my beta readers for the book, and he's like, do you have anything to help me out with this time thing? So we kind of sat down, and I helped him prototype time. And I said, why don't you take some, and this is a rapid prototype. One of my favorites is using Post-its, because everybody has them in their office. I said, why don't you take some Post-its? You can write them number 1 through 14 or not, and then put them on a straight line down the wall. So you see 14 Post-its. And then every morning, rip one of the Post-its off and stick it in a glass jar or vase, somewhere where you see it every single day. And then when the Post-its start going down, it's diminishing returns, your vase, the Post-its start going up. It didn't change the entire perspective of it, but it did help him, and it will, to be able to look at it and realize it's 14 days, we're going to be able to make it, we can control this, it's not that bad. So prototypes help you put things in perspective. And for me, like I said, I've been having some whiplash time problems. I've used one for myself where I try to put this in perspective because it seems like it's going on forever. I've used a measuring tape, and I'm probably going to live to be about 80. So I pulled out the measuring tape for 80 inches, and I allocated an inch per year. And I looked at where my life is. I'm kind of down towards the end of it, but I've got a ways to go to 80. Where I am right now and where we are, we're not even halfway through the year, and we're about 8 weeks into the pandemic, and that's less than 1/4 of an inch. That's 3/16 of an inch. So 3/16 of an inch for my age, for 5-some feet, and still more to go. I mean, we don't know how long this is going to last, but to keep it in perspective, it's probably not going to be as long as my entire life. So for me, every now and then when I'm feeling like a little whiplashed, I pull that out and I look at it, and it helps kind of put it in perspective for me. So the next slide is the evaluate phase. Shine, refine, and redesign. This is the testing. And this is what I've been doing basically now to reevaluate how I've been doing this like 3 or 4 weeks ago when I had to reevaluate how I was setting my life up so I wouldn't isolate with people, so I could redo my schedule, so I could plan some more fun. Because I realized I had basically put myself on a narrow beam mode, was walking the beam. I was in survival mode as opposed to designing my life for living. I was designing it to survive. And that's kind of anxiety producing. So I had to redefine it. Anytime I need to redefine something for myself, designers look at things like patterns and systems. And we normally look, some people call it habits or routines. I would call it a system, because habits and routines can be individual, but patterns, you need to connect them all together to make a pattern. And systems all interlie with each other to be a working human system, like your body is a developed system. So I always work at a system, and then one system that everybody has that always works when people say they don't have any is their morning routine. Everybody has a morning routine that they do probably without even thinking of it. And that's a really good system. If you get up in the morning and you can get all the way to making your breakfast without putting a lot of bandwidth in it, that's a successful system. So anytime I need to regulate, because I was staying up a little bit later watching Netflix, getting up a little bit later, then things start falling apart. And it wasn't beating myself up. It was just like the ball starts rolling and it's not very comfortable. So when I'm trying to regulate a system, I basically do what it's called a task analysis. And I've done this before, but I would recommend it for anybody. It sounds like work, but it puts this in perspective. If you have a system that works, which is your morning routine, take you're gonna need like a pad of paper, and then write down your morning routine. Like you're in bed, your eyes open, your head moves off the pillow. Every single tiny little task that you do you have to put a time frame on it. Either, get to the kitchen and make coffee, or finish making breakfast, or whatever's the end of your routine. Mine's done at breakfast when I go to the gym. But fill up the paper with all the tiny little pieces of tasks numerically, and you will be surprised at the hundreds and hundreds of tasks that you do without even thinking about it. And for me, that was pretty much pre-pandemic. It started to fall apart a little bit during this pandemic. The idea that you're prototyping it and you're looking at the task is that you get to see that you've already done this successfully. And people have been talking a lot on these talks about how the brain is designed to be like flight and fright. It's also designed in being present. It's also designed to rest. And when you're in a system like that and you're not thinking about your morning task, you're still awake and you're cognizant and you know what you're doing, but your brain is resting. And you actually need that during the day because you cannot be in full focus all the time. So if you don't have systems of morning routine, you're actually using more bandwidth and you're tiring yourself out. And what happens at the end of you breaking down the system is that you numb yourself out. So I always recommend to people to kind of regulate that one and always start with the morning routine. And then, we have time at home, build more systems on that, build a night routine, build a morning routine. So when you don't want to isolate, you're at your best self when you want to be with your friends. So we can see the last slide. The last slide, I think, represents exactly where I was in the shine and refine and redesign. This is a quote from the Talmud. And I love this one because it talks about love and fear, how acts of love are greater than acts of fear. When I was designing my life for only survival, I was acting out of fear. And I think we all were in the beginning. And what really counteracts that is trying to do joyous things, trying to bring people into your life, trying to have some fun, so you can normalize it, so you can counteract the fear that we're going through. The quote is also really powerful because love and fear live together in this. So we all have to, be careful and, be on a survival mode to a degree, and have fun and non-isolate on one hand as well. Love and fear kind of work together because if you are in love, you always fear that you're going to be losing it. So that was a quick go through, and we have so long extra time, so I hope you have some questions.
I do. Wow. Wow. What?
Oh, I forgot to mention the book. Also,
yes.
Thank
please.
you. So what I was going to do for the offering of this is the book is obviously a little bit more complex. And if I went through this, I'm not a public speaker, so I'm not as refined as the other public speakers, and I apologize for that. But I would like to, the challenges and the ideology that I put into the book, the working that you can do to create the challenge are in the book. And it's a little bit more complex than what I gave here. But I know that they send out the recording and they send out information on Fridays. I'd like to make an offering of the book for 99 cents to download from Kindle, because I know that people need as much help as they can get. And I figure 99 cents, if it's something in there or something that I've said that can help you, I would love to do that. So I've loved all of the stuff that we've done here. So if that's the least thing I could do.
Wow, Rick. Well, thank you so much. I don't know where to start. There's so much. My curiosity is just, my mind's kind of blown a little bit by this. It's really been amazing. In your book, let's start with your book. It's a series of interviews, isn't it? How did you choose who to interview? And you tell some stories about it. Tell me a little bit about that process. Yeah, tell me about that process.
Well, the whole human-centered design, in one of the first interviews that I did, I interviewed Joe Gebbia. I was lucky enough to interview him. He's one of the co-founders of Airbnb. He's an industrial designer as well. And the man that really started human-centered design was Victor Papanek, who was my professor. So all of this ideology has been around. Victor studied underneath Buckminster Fuller. So it's been really around since the 30s. And so Buckminster Fuller worked on this from 1930 to 1980-ish. And Victor Papanek was developing these processes from probably the 50s to the 90s. And I worked with Victor when I was in school and worked on him with some actual tangible projects when we were there. So when I reached out to Joe, which is hard to get hold of a billionaire that works for Airbnb, I basically fed him with Victor's information and the jobs and stuff that I'd worked with them, so he would know that. So getting an interview with him was very, very easy after that, because he was really excited to hear what the real Victor Papanek was like. Because he wrote a lot of books, but he never really did a lot of personal presentations. There's not a lot of recordings on him. So he wanted to hear what it was like to work with the real. So I was able to, we co-interviewed each other basically.
Did you notice any patterns in the people that you interviewed? You talked about systems and patterns. I wonder if, like, now that the book is done and you've looked at this from sort of an industrial design perspective, if you noticed any of the patterns of the people that you interviewed and who you chose to interview and feature. Anything about yourself in that in relationship to?
Actually, you know, I also interviewed Carissa Thacker, who works for the Whole Being Institute. She's she has a business working with businesses to bring them to a higher level. And I interviewed another industrial designer that does improv acting as a form of prototyping. I interviewed Mario Tino, the architect. And who else did I interview? One thing you were asking me about patterns, one thing that I noticed about everybody when they were talking about design, how it works for them, what they were going to do is basically kind of what you're doing here. They were very open with their information. They were interested in helping other people. They had some positive information that they were willing to share. So when I applied it to a design, like when I told them what I was doing and how they could use their creativity to benefit somebody, they were more than willing to do it. They backed it, they understood what I was trying to do, and they were more than willing to help. So I found people to be very open, very good, very honest, and very willing to share.
So it's that quote from the Talmud, right?
Yeah.
That he who acts from love is greater than he who acts from fear. So they were acting out of love. That's really beautiful. I wanted to talk about a little bit the relationship to positive psychology. And one of the things that positive psychology talks about is taking care of what you can. So when you were talking about shine, refine, and redesign, and this idea of designing to survive, I wonder if we can ask people in the chat, have you been designing your time, and I'm raising my hand, at times to survive? And now that you've heard Rick talk about it, can you think about, am I also designing my time to thrive, right? And I also thought it was interesting, Rick, that we've been talking about strengths, character strengths, and prudence and self-regulation are supposed to be the lowest worldwide, but not individually, but to redefine your morning routine seems to be really powerful. So talk to us a little bit more about that. What are the things that you think that can really help us? I know that's a hack, but what if you're not particularly good at self-regulation or prudence or those kind of things? How can you start?
Basically, everybody, like I said about the morning routine, everybody has a routine. You just don't know that you have one. They have a system in place. They have a ritual in place. They have a habit. I normally start with the morning routine because people don't realize they have it. And if they don't actually believe that, if anybody in New York, but if people drive a car, if you have a car and you've ever driven it, you drive regularly, if you've ever had that experience of going to point A to the grocery store, a trip that you take a lot, and you can't remember, you got there safely, but you can't remember everything along the way, that's basically muscle memory. Everything is going fine in your mind and your brain is kind of calming down. So that's handling a system because you're not in a startled mode. Same thing with your morning routine. If you basically set up routines, you set up systems, you set up rituals and habits, it gives your mind a resting point, it gives your brain a resting point. And then it gives you the ability to make a choice with what you're going to do with the extra bandwidth you have after the rest. Because if I have like an evening routine and then a morning routine, so it's like set in stone, I know exactly what to do. It just kind of, this is kind of interrupted it, to be honest with you. But it's pretty much set in stone. So I have more bandwidth to make a choice of how I want to apply it. So when I made these decisions to, open up the door to not isolate so much, I had a little bit of extra bandwidth because I'm not using it because I'm getting up normally at the same time, doing the same routine every single morning. So if people don't have that, it's not, you actually probably have a routine that you do. And what I'm suggesting is that you find one, normally the morning routine, monitor it, and then add to it if you need to. And if you've fallen off track with it, like I fell off track with my morning routine, you look through the list, it's really easy to start re-regulating it by just doing some simple tweaks. Like you're not getting up at the same time, mark that, do 2 or 3 or 1, start really simple and just adjust it the next day, just adjust it the next day. You can do it for 1 week with a system that you already have in place. You'll be able to self-regulate normally in a week. And that's the whole advantage of doing it, because when you're looking at the piece of paper and you see that you actually accomplished that, and then you have more bandwidth in your brain, you can make the choice of what you want to do with it. That's the power of it.
I think that's beautiful. I was also thinking about your Post-it notes, and that you could take your Post-it notes, a Post-it note, and write down what are my tasks, and then you could even play with switching them around. Yeah. I know that one of the things that I'm very much like you, my morning routine and my evening routine, I've looked at that and I'm like, okay, during this pandemic, I'm going to look at sleep, making sure I'm getting my sleep and regulating when I'm going to bed, because that's gonna be key. My playtime, I'm gonna book that in. And I was talking with Michael Camber about this, and he loved it, that I have a fundraiser every day. And I can tell the difference. The days I haven't scheduled in enough fun, and I've worked too much, and I've had too many Zoom calls or whatever, I really can feel the difference. And then, of course, my exercise in there, my spiritual practice, and then a news diet. And I loved that our newsman even has a news diet.
No, that one's incredibly important. And everybody, the end quote was also really powerful too, because we're talking about using, you mentioned before, using what we've got. And Megan really described very clearly the flight or flight approach and how it works in your body and what it does. So that's a very natural trait that we all have that's really good to learn about. That's a system, that's a bodily system. Humans also, if you're gonna, the old design phrase, work with what you've got, you also have another one that you basically is innate with you too, that's to seek pleasure. Obviously that's to propagate, but it's not only for that. So when we're talking about not isolating, building up joy, building up fun, doing all of those things, the things that you're doing for yourself, the things that I'm adding for myself, that's seeking pleasure. And those things make you a happier person in the long run. So when you're in a state of trying to design for your life as opposed to design for survival. Seeking pleasure, obviously positive, healthy pleasure, but seeking pleasure that's joyous and fun and laughing with your friends, or a birthday party with an improv person, a Zoom party, a Zoom dinner party. All of those things are important because they help you seek pleasure, and they help you remind you that life has a future focus. Trying to extend the life of or humanity by breeding is basically just saying we want to live forever. So that is a future focus, and that it's important to know that when you're not isolating, that when this all ends, you're still going to have the same friends. You're going to have relationships with your family, and you're improving them by doing all of those things, because we're getting through this together. We're doing this as a group. I used to think of myself when this started, and Megan said it better than I did, that she was talking about the narrow focus. When I was on my survival mode, I was trying to stay on a beam, and that's difficult because I'm not a gymnast. I'm a designer, and it's really hard to stay on 4 inches carrying toilet paper, Lysol, and all the stuff that you're supposed to do, and trying to regulate all of these schedules and stuff. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of energy. But today, after doing all of these things, I'm kind of reframed it. I've shined it, redefined it to basically be bowling. Now I'm bowling. I've extended the bandwidth of what is no longer a 4-inch little beam. I've got a whole bowling alley, and my goal is to just not get in the gutters. And some days I get a strike. Some days I don't. Some days I roll in the gutter, but I get another try at it. And everybody is wearing bowling shoes just like me. We're all in it together. And eventually the game is going to end. We're going to go back to some semblance of a normal life. So for me, I giving myself a larger bandwidth to be able to play, to be able to enjoy, and to be able to accept this for what it is, as opposed to trying to be really tight in survival, has made this a little bit more livable.
Beautiful. It also strikes me that, and I wondered if we could get your advice on kind of project in the future a little bit, because some parts of the country and some parts of the world are coming back. And I was reading an article in the Times yesterday, and they were talking about that there's 2 groups of people. One that are like, okay, I'm not going to live forever, and I'm just going to go for it. And they're kind of going back and designing, or not designing at all, their reentry by sort of throwing caution to the wind. And then there seems to be another sort of approach to that, which is to really be really, really cautious. So I think we're going to need your techniques as we design our re-entry. And to think about, they also interviewed people in Wuhan right now, and how it's just different, right? And they of course are 8 months or so out of it, or for a long time, or I'm not quite sure exactly the time on that, but it's 4 months maybe that they have been doing that. So I'm asking you to project into the future a little bit, Rick, but how do you think you're going to be able to design, like working with what we have, which is we're going to be wearing masks, we're going to be needing hand sanitizer when we go in and out of things. Probably we're in New York, so we're going to be looking at public transportation. How to do that, if you've thought about that at all?
Two prongs to that, or 2 prongs to the answer. When I go back to systems, and I talk about system failure and how to regulate those with your morning routine, think of urban planning, a city as a system. Lots of different systems going. You've got transportation, people, living. Us New Yorkers who are like, this is a city that never sleeps. We have entertainment. We have a hustle and a bustle. Those are all systems, people. All of those systems have shut down. Pretty much. They've shut down. People are pretty much in their apartments. There is some activity, but there's not a lot. And yes, there has been problems in New York, but I live here and I am out, not a lot, but with a mask on, and I do jog. To be honest with you, there's been some issues, but for a city this large, there really hasn't been any major issues. So for me, that basically says that if a system is collapsing, that it hasn't collapsed, because people are not freaking out in fear or rioting. And that says a lot about how good people are, because they're self-regulating. They're, even though we're losing it, nobody's losing it to the degree that they could. You know, I can't project how long it'll last, but people are doing actually really well. And the other part of your question was, you know, what we're going to do about it and how can design methodology work with it. That's exactly what they're going to be doing. City planning, social structures are all using design methodology because they're going to have to ideate, they're going to have to prototype, they're going to have to evaluate, and then they're going to have to redo it. So anytime they're going to be doing any opening, there's going to be a lot of opening and closing, a lot of reevaluating how we do it. So design is going to be, this type of methodology is going to be important, because nothing is going to be, until we have a vaccine, until we have a cure for it, there isn't going to be a static stop point. So they are going to have to do a lot of trial, back, forth, find out what works, find out what people do. Because, you know, even in Who Down for what I understand, they've opened a lot of things, but it didn't mean that people showed up.
Exactly. Yeah. I've heard that as well.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to talk more about rapid prototypes. And you've given some examples, but how would you do a rapid prototype for the morning routine or the evening routine?
Well, I did the task analysis, and I told you, you know, to do your system. That's a form of a prototype. So you could do the same thing. A rapid prototype, again, is something that you could make from stuff at home. You have to do it rapidly, quickly, and then you have to be able to hold it so it's touchy and feely, so you can look at it, and you have to be able to show it to somebody else so they can evaluate it. From a positive psychology point of view, from a self-actualization point of view, this is really important, because it stops the blame and the shame game and the victimization, and it starts working into action. Because let me just go over the major principle of the idea, principle of human-centered design again. It's that you have to have a positive understanding that there's going to be a way of solving the problem. So when you're doing a rapid prototype, whether you're putting Post-its up and doing a life map, you have to understand that there's going to be some way you're going to be able to solve this problem. And when you see it, that doesn't mean you have the answer. That just means that you have a direction to work on. So when you're actualizing it, you're stopping the keeping it in your head, and you're holding it in your hand, and you're moving it around, and then you're manipulating it to work on it. So it becomes actionable, and you're controlling it. So it gives you self-actualization. It gives you the ability to say, I'm in charge of this, and I can change and modify it. That's the benefit of a prototype. Because just because you're prototyping something doesn't mean you're going to have to not change it. Like I've had to change my routine. But the benefit of it is that it shows you that you can. You can make a modification for it. You can change it. And that's the real major benefit for it. Because you're not standing there paralyzed saying there's nothing I can do.
It seems like it's growth mindset in action.
You're carrying it. And if you don't know what to do, that's the idea of carrying it. You can show it to someone and say, what do I do with this? See, that's why it has to be touchy and portable in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's your hands, like putting the past and present together, a measuring tape that you can show somebody, something that's portable that you can get someone's opinion on if you need that.
Yeah, and I love that. Maria Montessori felt like our hands, working with our hands, helped us connect to our brains. And I learned from a neurologist that the hands have one of the largest maps in the brain, other than the lips. The lips have one of them. So it makes sense that what you're talking about is like, you're making it tangible. And also, like we know from positive psychology, 40% of the pie is intentional activities and choices that we can make. We learned that from the How of Happiness. How of Happiness by Sonia Lyubomirsky. 40% of our happiness is within our control. So human design really helps us design this so that we can have an influence over what's happening. So, mitigating learned helplessness, a whole bunch of stuff it seems very exciting to me to think about it this way.
And if I go back to the principle of you're assuming there's going to be a positive outcome and you're working for it, and you go back to the 5 phases of how you do it, it's not magical thinking. It's not, I have hope and it's just going to happen. You're not waiting. You're actually making that assumption and then you're working towards it. And it doesn't mean because you're going to be doing a prototype and you're going to be testing it that you're going to get exactly what you want. That's not design. But you're going to get the best solution possible within the situation. And the important part about it is that you're actually doing something about it. And you're doing it in real time. It's not just it's not a dream and a wish, it's something that you're working on. And for me, the benefit of it is that, you start trusting the process. And when you start trusting the process, you actually realize that you can trust yourself. You can trust yourself in doing it. And, being able to say that you can trust yourself doing a process when times are not going well, it gives you something. And if you're not trusting what's going on outside, if you're not trusting what's going on in the news, if you're not trusting, what's happening in the world or in the disease, at least you have something to turn to in a way of solving it. You have an action that you can do.
Speaking of actions, I love this share in the chat. Simple things like cooking a meaningful breakfast with my daughter or applying my favorite makeup item helps me thrive in my day-to-day. It sounds silly, but adds meaning to my day. Doesn't sound silly at all to me, son. It sounds practical, and it's like those micro moments of micronutrients throughout the day that Barbara Fredrickson was talking about, and also how to personalize things. It's not like we're giving everybody, okay, this is the design that everyone should do. It's very personal, isn't it?
Definitely. The idea, you're making the decisions along the way, you're ideating it, you're designing your own life. What I'm trying to do is just give people a structure of how to do it. And I really love the fact that somebody said, put on, when I'm talking about all of this stuff, it sounds very academic and it has nothing to do with aesthetics or anything that's fun or beautiful, but in reality it does. If it makes you feel better and it can help you approach the world in a more positive attitude, that is prototyping something. Putting on makeup is a prototype. You can do this and show the world and tell them what do you think? And I think that actually, I've worked in that industry for a long time. And I actually, people in industrial design would say there's a lot of design methodology that goes into any form of business, and I'm in branding, and particularly in what I do. So it is relevant, but also I think taking care of the aesthetics and taking care of yourself and how you feel about yourself and how you feel about your memories and going out and building good memories is good design.
So true. And I love this personalization. And your idea when you were talking about if you trust a system, you can trust yourself. And so many people have been traumatized by this. Can you talk about how human design can help us mitigate even sort of traumatic experiences? It seems like if we have a system in place, it can help ground us and center us and even help. It's kind of like the outside helping the inside and then the inside designing the system as well. It seems like there's a real exchange there.
Well, that's kind of how I started with this whole process. I went through a phase in my life many years ago where I basically hit bottom, in recovery. I hit bottom, and I really didn't have a really good perspective. My glass tipped over, it wasn't positive or negative, and the carpet had been pulled out from underneath my feet. The world didn't make any sense whatsoever, and I didn't trust myself and obviously what I was doing or many other people. But one thing I did know that I had is I had some good memories, and I had some type of education and work that I knew I trusted. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that it worked. I knew it worked for work. I didn't know it worked for my life. And so when I started rebuilding my life and I actually started applying this methodology to my life and I realized that I could start trusting that. And building up trust in yourself is very important because it builds up resilience. If there's a problem that comes along that you don't know how to solve, I have never dealt with an epidemic before. No one has. I mean, not that it's alive, I don't think. Nobody really knows what to do, but I do know what to do to design things that I can control. I do know how to ask people how to survive this. I do know that if my brain is on survival mode, how to take care of that. I do have a system that I trust. So I have a resting point. I have a way of being able to self-regulate. I have a way of building up a structure that I can rely on. And that's a benefit of this methodology, because when all else fails, at least you have something.
I love it. I also wanted you to clarify as our last point, you know, someone in the chat was saying that you need to be very disciplined to organize your everyday activities. And then someone else said, when you create habits, you don't have to be disciplined. But there's, I think, a misconception, and I think I had it myself. I don't know if anybody else is like me. We already have habits, and I think that's what you're saying. It's like, it's not, we already have systems, we already have patterns. If we were to be like an animal tracker, right, and we followed ourselves around, we would see that we do things relatively similarly from day to day, especially if we charted our path over time. And they talk about the reptile brain, or the basic brain, moving towards and moving away from things, and the pleasure principle. And even Alan Brown, who was one of our earlier speakers, talked about how we're conditioned to move towards things that are pleasurable. So for some of us, that might be, you know, our vices, but we really do have a pattern. And that's what I hear you saying. Am I right in that?
Definitely. Basically, it's the old design saying, work with what you've got. You know, once you start learning how to work with your brain, like if you're going to be, you know, attracted to pleasure, you can define it. It doesn't have to be that. When people talk about systems or rituals or habits or how hard they are to create, that is kind of true if you're doing really complex ones, but they're not that hard. And you do have the ability to do it. And you don't have to start with the huge thing. Everybody already has them. You can just already start with what you've got and then just add to it slowly. And you'll be surprised how you can self-regulate by doing it. And if then when you have one established, that's good, it's easy to add more and build on.
And I love that simple things. We think it's the big things that make the difference,
No.
but I actually find that taking a moment out and petting my dog, it just makes me happy. You know, it's these little choices that I make throughout the day that actually define my happiness. You know, these little micronutrients, as Barbara Fredrickson was saying. And I'm noticing your flowers, vase behind you, and I thought, wow, you made that choice. And then for me, every time I've glanced at you, I've enjoyed that. So, and then I chose to put on this particular top. I've really been looking at, okay, how can I add little moments of joy and pleasure in my life? And it sounds like I'm on the right track in terms of design methodology.
Yes. Yes, I think you are. I mean, I think beauty has a power all of its own, whether, you know, you're going to be doing methodology or just talking about styling or not. If you're attracted to it and you find it beautiful, I would say, if it's healthy and good, add it to your life. You know, joy is an important thing to add.
Is there any final things that you would like us to know that have really worked for you? Or, I mean, I'm so excited about picking up your books. Lindsay said that we'll send the exact link, everybody, so that you can get that. She said she was doing a search for you, and she needs to have your exact name, right? Or else she gets some kids' books.
That's why I'm using Richard, not Rick.
Gotcha. Okay, that's important, because some people might want to go out and get it today versus waiting until Friday. So what would be the best way for them to search for it under your full name? Or can we put the slide back up, actually?
It's on chat. It's under praeterdesign.com/blog. You can look at the book and stuff there. And there's also a blog, so you can look at some of the writing as well.
Great. Well, I have learned so much. I didn't have any idea about human-centered design. So I thank you so much for, you know, broadening my world. Talk about broadening and building, right?
Yeah.
And establishing and helping us to establish a foundation. I'm going to unmute everybody. Please thank Rick and wave and say goodbye. And we'll see you all tomorrow.
Bye.
Oh, I love that. Cindy's got a little heart for you.
Thank
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks,
Thank
Rick.
you.
Yes.
Nice
Take care,
shot.
you guys. I look forward to hearing tomorrow how you've redesigned your morning. We'll see you later, Rick.
You bet. You bet.
Take care,
Ciao, ciao.
everybody.
Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.
Bye.